Hi, this is Eli Ocheltree of the SnoKing Beekeepers Association. It is May 22nd, 2024, and this is the first of a half dozen short videos to introduce the Queen Rearing Workshop of 2024 by the SnoKing Beekeepers Association at the Malt Bee Apiary. I'm doing this speaking to the computer, so I hope this works well. Instead of trying to schedule additional meetings at a very busy time of the year, May and June, we are trying this system of short video clips to explain and introduce the concept of the whole Rearing Queens as a Club workshop. Not many beekeeping clubs do this. And that is part of why it needs an explanation. A lot of beekeeping clubs will do a 1-day, 2-day workshop and call that a queen rearing class or workshop, but it doesn't take you through the full process. So this is the third year that SnoKing has decided to do this. And next year we will make it a full program and charge people for coming. At this point, we just ask that you be a member of SnoKing Beekeepers or be willing to become a member by paying the yearly annual dues. We are starting out by sending out a queen rearing calendar to everyone interested in actually joining the workshop, and possibly later we'll be sending these to members as well. This queen rearing calendar looks very nice and very simple, and if you have actually tried queen rearing as a small scale beekeeper, you may have already discovered it's not quite as easy as those quick 1-hour videos on the internet lead you to believe, or even as a half-day, 1-day workshop leads you to believe. It does not take you through the process of actually raising good quality queens in your own apiary. You're not ready to do that after just an hour or a couple of hours of instruction. Most people aren't. I have done it by myself, and I'm not recommending that anyone else do it. So that was many years ago. So as a club, if we do this, we can set our goals, set our plan, go through the entire process, and produce some queens as our reward for having done all the work. In setting the goals, the biggest problem that I see for beginners and intermediate and even advanced beekeepers is deciding what to do. There's so much confusion. There is too much information out there on the internet. There's too many different opinions. Going back to the old joke about if you have 10 beekeepers in a room, you are lucky if there's only 11 opinions. There could be far more. We need to use the KISS principle. Keep it simple, students. Cut through that confusion surrounding queen rearing, all the different things you hear about it. So as a club, we have designed a simplified plan that we will follow in this queen rearing workshop. And as I said, this is our third year, so we're really feeling confident that we have it this year, how to do it. And we are going to get our product, great queens. And in some ways, the much more important product is understanding the concepts of queen rearing. And then when you go to do it yourself or with some other group of beekeepers, maybe go back to your own, another club that you belong to. A lot of people have dual, triple, and more membership in local bee clubs. And we would like to see all the bee clubs in Western Washington benefit from this program. The process of raising queens is not a couple of hours. I don't care what the internet promises you, some magic system whereby you can raise great queens in just minutes or hours. It actually takes weeks. And in completing that 6 to 8 week process, you can pick up the concepts, especially when you can discuss them with someone else, and you can raise great queens by putting those concepts into action. We really do want to get this out to all clubs. We need a plan, and I'm not finding it on the internet. There are timelines, and thank you very much to the Susquehanna beekeepers from the East Coast who published their timeline, and a number of other bee clubs have done so as well. And I think it was a different bee club that shared the basic copyright royalties-free queen wheel that we use, and you saw on one of the beginning slides. But we don't have a plan really for Western Washington. And there are things that won't work for small scale hobbyist beekeepers and that won't work in Western Washington, not reliably. And in any team effort like this, you get to know other beekeepers in the best way possible in the apiary, not trying to put things into words in over the internet, even in person without hands-on practice while you're talking. It is not always the best way to talk to beekeepers. Often, the best way is to work with them. And we'd love to have some fun while we're at it. So if you would like to join this workshop after I explain why we are doing, what we are doing, what we are not doing, if you want to join, first thing is send me an email. Then you are on the weekly emails list. Pay the dues. It's $30 for the annual dues to SnoKing if you haven't already. If you took a class since Labor Day, you have paid the dues for this year because our membership year runs October 1st or year round to September 30th of the next year. So if you took a fall class, you already paid the dues for the current year. People can't make it for the whole 6 or 8 weeks. We know that. We will meet every Saturday in that 6 to 8 week period, and maybe a little longer to clean up the apiary afterwards and sort of debrief. But if you can, possibly sign up in advance. Please do so. We really do need that commitment. And sometimes signing up is a good way to be able to tell other people, significant others, family members, friends, that you have already signed up and you are committed. And so therefore you have to come on those Saturdays and some midweek dates as well. So go to Sign Up Genius, see if you can sign up. And we do need people midweek. Not everything can be done on every 7-day schedule. We've tried that. It can kind of work. If you are working and you understand the concepts well enough, you can basically do what you need to do on every 7 days. For example, you have Saturdays or Sundays and you're doing this at home after you've taken this workshop. It will make sense what to do. And you can do it that way. Very little in the middle of the week. But it really facilitates and it is good backup for the people who suddenly find out they can't make it on a Saturday. If we can fill in for them midweek, we can slide some things that need to be done. If you look at the timeline, I already sent out the timeline with the first email, which I will send out to anyone who wants to sign up. And if we can get people to come on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday of each week, that's very helpful. We need to try to get 2 people on the same weekday, and that's a little bit more awkward. So email me and we'll see what we can do. What day of the week might work out for more than one person at a time to come. It's no fun working by yourself. You just don't learn as much. This is the first of 5 or 6 weekly short videos that I'm going to send out at an average of about 1 per week, although this one's a little on the late side. Should have been out last week. What we are doing each week in the apiary is going to make more sense if you watch these or listen to them. This one especially is going to be very much podcast form. So if you want to listen to this just audio, I think you will get almost everything out of it just by what I am saying. At the end of the workshop, you pick up the queens you earned, and every 5 hours you help in the apiary, you earn a queen to take home at the end. It worked out actually to like every 3 or 4 hours last year, but every 5 hours, I am sure. So if you come for 2 or 3 times, you know you are taking home a queen on a frame of her own brood at the end. Now, why don't you just do this on your own? Why should a club do it? I've done it on my own. I know a lot of people who have, and they've been disappointed in the results. The first problem is choosing a queen rearing method can be really confusing. because of what the internet says and the older beekeepers who've done it a certain way their entire beekeeping career. And we need to adapt to our own personal needs and to Western Washington climate. That is a big challenge in itself. It is pouring rain outside on sort of alternate days in my area, and this is May 22nd. The bees are actually in rain dearth right now. The overwintered hives that are going to produce the brood we will use to set up our mating nuclei in just a couple of weeks. So I am actually feeding my overwintered hives, which were fine and strong, but I need them to not stop raising brood because of rain dearth that's ongoing right now. That's a sort of concept that's really nice to be able to discuss with someone else. We're going to do grafting and cassette, which is basically grafting with one less step. Cassette grafting, really. And we're going to compare it to other methods at the very end. But we're going to start with grafting because that is the one that is the most talked about and generates the most interest among people who are going to rear their own queens. There are a lot of reasons why a club should try this as a group. There's the cost angle. There's a lot of specialized equipment recommended by a lot of the different methods. Even grafting requires a certain amount of equipment, especially when you get to the last part of it that is not covered in the steps on how to raise queens, isn't adequately covered in internet and short workshops. You need to proof your queens. You can't put, not realistically, resources wise, loss of honey production, tying up all your, I'll go into that later in this presentation. You need to be able to put a proofed queen in to a full-size hive. That means you're going to have to prove your queens. Make sure that they really are laying well, worker brood, fully mated, in good shape, compact pattern in the brood nest. You need to see that before you put them into an entire hive that you don't want to suddenly find out that it's queenless or has a drone laying queen or whatever. It ties up too much of your equipment. So mating nukes are really an important part. At the end of the 6 to 8 weeks, you are looking at, is this queen performing well enough? I want to keep her. If you tie up whole hives, you lose a lot of honey production, a lot of resources. So before you get into specialized equipment, grafting or mating nukes or queen castles, a number of things that you will hear that you should buy to raise queens, I recommend the try before you buy. Just come and do it at our club and take a look at these different methods and see if they work. Your resources otherwise get really tied up in queen rearing the year you try to do it, the first year you try. Also, queen rearing is not a one-day, I don't care what the internet says, it is not what you do in one day. There are time steps, and timing is critical. If we are rearing queens as a club, or even if you later on do it as a small group, or even with one bee buddy, someone can fill in with for you at a step that you otherwise can't complete at that time the best way that you would like to do it. In a club, we can. The number of steps actually involved in grafting is actually overwhelming for most people, and it's why grafting frequently fails. Or it isn't very successful. There's some success, but not what was promised in the presentation that was selling you grafting equipment or an idea. Really understanding the concepts will give you success. You'll have a great chance to talk bees if you do it as a club. And really, we would like as a club to publish a system that any Western Washington club could use successfully, while we are building up a team of beekeepers who want to network, communicate, help each other. To do this, you've got to simplify. I keep, in my classes, I keep coming back to the KISS. Keep it simple, students. Pick one method. Don't try too many methods all at once. So there are 7 methods of beekeeping. I remember reading one article on it and saying, but I don't need 7 methods. I need one that works. So the club is going to pick basically one, grafting and what is virtually grafting cassette method. It only changes one step from grafting. Don't get too involved in a long list of queen traits or deciding what strain. And I'll explain why it's better just to pick the best overwintered queen you've got. That's what you really have handy as a hobbyist and small scale beekeeper. And after you've decided you really like queen raising, yes, then invest in a $500, $1,250 breeder queen, artificially inseminated or whatever. Okay, fine. But first start and get the concepts down before you invest that kind of money. You could use the club equipment. We can all be on the same timeline and support each other with steps listed out one after another on the timelines. And I already sent out a long version, a short version, and a shortest version. And sometimes I'm tempted to get a one paragraph version that makes it even shorter. I might yet do that. With this timeline and these steps, if you miss anything, if you're working on your own, the entire queen raising project can be in jeopardy. But as a club, we have backup. Any day you have to miss, steps will still get done. Your queens are going to be proofed before they're picked up. Queens are not being properly proofed, even commercial queens. It is getting better and better known, hard to hide, that some queens are not high quality. When you buy them, when they come in your package or in your nuke, most nukes, the queen that comes in the nuke did not lay the eggs and the larvae in there. That is now the standard for buying nukes through large producers. Different if you buy from a beekeeper you know. Because of that, the queens were possibly not completely and totally mated and proofed. Proofed means you not only think she was mated, you gave her a chance to actually go out and fly at the correct time in good weather, and she's in good enough health, and drones are present, and you're pretty confident she got mated. It's actually looking at the laying pattern that some days after mating, not that many days, but some days afterwards, you look to see if she's actually laying well. Then, the easiest way to know that she's laying well is to see the capped brood after she's been laying long enough. So you're going 9 days after she's laid the egg, you're seeing the capping. And when you see those cappings, you immediately know, is it drone or the worker brood you're looking for? Is it a good compact pattern? There you know. She is proofed at that point. As a club, even if you can't graft or you can't do certain things, you still can be very valuable. In a team, we can find a place for you, even if you don't know much about beekeeping. It's just the hours you show up, and we will find whatever you can do. Some people are just absolutely great at grafting, and they will graft extra larvae for us that I can do it, but I have to concentrate. It takes time, and some people are just naturally good at it. And we take advantage of those people. Plus, everyone tries it, right? Everyone tries grafting. But if that isn't your forte, that's okay. You can help with all the other things that need to be done. Take a look at that timeline, and you are going to understand the concepts. Concepts are everything. In your first couple of years of beekeeping, understanding what the bees do and how the bees think. We manage bees. We don't really raise them. They raise themselves, but we manage them, and we can encourage, we can be supportive, but we don't control the bees. As everyone knows now that we've just about finished our swarm season, although with the rain, I suspect the swarm season will go well into June. And you can get answers to all your questions. So you have to decide why raise queens. First of all, you want to learn, it's curiosity, but there is the cost. If you are interested in expanding your apiary, replacing your older queens, there's even quite a push for replacing all queens every year or every other year. Even smaller beekeepers are finding that younger queens often overwintered well. If they have had time to mate and you've proofed them, you know they're laying well, they are laying well enough to lay the winter bees that you need to overwinter, those fat body winter bees. If you get young queens, overwintering goes up. And this is a known phenomenon. A lot of commercial beekeepers replace half their queens every year, and that way they are replacing their queens entirely every 2 years. And some have gone all the way to annual requeening. They've just decided they always want young queens. Queen quality can be improved quite a bit by raising your own, and I'll go into more detail on that either later in this video or in videos to follow. Having queens when you need them, that is a very difficult thing. We'll cover that at the end of the course. You produce these queens, now you want to make sure they're available when you need them. A queen loss in late fall, early winter, or early spring can result in colony death because you, first of all, have to recognize that they're queenless. And then when you do, how in the world do you come up with a queen in the middle of winter? There actually is a solution to that. And it's part of sustainability. Part of we need to take control of, I believe, and I think a lot of beekeepers believe, we need to take control of our queen raising availability. It's going to be part of being sustainable as beekeepers. You also might be interested in raising queens to pick up a little revenue, maybe help other beekeepers out, and maybe charge to at least get your expenses back. You're going to increase your beekeeping skills if you take on queen rearing and understand your bees better. Haven't you always really wanted to be a bee whisperer? Right? Why not? Couldn't we all? There's a lot of cost factors too when you replace queens. There's the problem of, are they even available? You're probably going to have to pay more if it's not the season that most are being produced in, say about now in May, April, May. You have to figure out how to get them, delivery to you or pick up. And then when you get the queen, you have to introduce her. And it's different if you do that with just the queen alone, with a frame of her brood, or inside of a nuke, which hopefully she's at least been moving around in, even if she didn't actually lay the eggs and the brood that you see. This is important because it costs, and failed introductions, if you don't successfully introduce her. She's alone, for example, and it's a difficult time of the year. Maybe they're in dearth and robbing's ongoing, late July, August. It can be difficult to introduce a queen when the colony is stressed. With a frame of brood, your chances go up, but your cost goes up. In a nuke, that is considered the best. And a lot of people say, especially when it's a bad time of year and the hive is stressed by dearth or robbing or other pressures, it might be best to put the queen first in a certain number of frames from that hive, even for a few days, make sort of a temporary nuke, and then introduce, merge that self-made, your own made nuke into the large hive. If every time you fail in introduction, it actually costs you even more than just the cost of the queen, because you're trying to get a queen introduced, and say you have a couple of failures, you could end up with laying worker situations and a lot of other complexities. And in all that, you lose honey production, or you lose your chance to grow your apiary that you were really counting on. Now, some of the issues that we cover are queen quality. You have to make decisions about queen quality and how to measure it. And we'll talk quickly about selecting breeder queens. Instead of worrying about what strain or what pedigree a queen supposedly has, although most queens in the United States are basically mutts, even the ones that are advertised as being from a specific strain, Carniolan, Italian, whatever, frequently they are offspring open baited from an open mated queen that might have had some of that pedigree or that strain. So instead, what we are going to do as a club, and what a lot of beekeepers do, is look at their overwintered queens and say, okay, This one came roaring out of winter, great brood production. The egg laying pattern looks great. She's not susceptible to any of the brood diseases that tend to show up, especially in the spring. Uh, European foul brood, chalk brood, those sorts of things. The temperament of the hive seems fine. If they're getting large without swarming, that means that they have a less of a swarming tendency. Overwintered queens have proved they've got wintering ability, and we're watching their spring buildup. This is a great way to select a queen. And if you start this way, then you can make the decision about spending money on expensive breeder queens later. But selecting one that you have seen the performance of, for example, right here in the Maltby apiary, we are selecting on the most important traits. In queen quality, some people say, well, you got to have those great genetics and you need to pay for those. You get what you pay for. Well, I'll quote you that a lot of beekeepers don't really believe that. And if you talk to a lot of beekeepers, they'll say things. Some of them are published. So here's a couple of published experienced beekeeping researchers who say, for example, Morris Ostrovsky, who was apparently based here in Washington, in his graft-free queen rearing, he talks about, he'll explain how a few high-quality queens can be raised without really using a lot of special equipment or tools by a beekeeper with just a few years of beekeeping experience. And with the support of people who have beekeeping experience, anyone can raise good queens. Another USDA honeybee research lab scientist, Dr. Farrar, said below average queens living in a great environment will outperform a great queen living in a poor environment every time. A number of other researchers have written on this. You want good quality queens, you make sure that they have good nutrition, and you make sure that the nurse bees that take care of them have had good nutrition. It doesn't just happen quickly. You select from strong, healthy hives your nurse bees who are going to raise out your queens. You're going to get superior nutrition, resulting in superior queens, even if they don't have special pedigree. If you raise your own queens, you will find that you have better acceptance and less supersedure. Supersedure rates on especially packages, but even on nukes, because remember that queen, frequently when you buy a nuke, was not the original queen. She's been released in there, and the bees may let her lay for a while, and then they decide they would rather raise their own queen. And you will see supersedure cells sometimes just form temporarily in package nuke installed hives. Sometimes you just see that quickly, but frequently the bees are serious. They don't want that queen for whatever reason. Maybe they detect a fault in her that you can't see. This is where I trust the bees. But when you raise bees in your own apiary, you get better acceptance. That 25% loss rate that has been referred to frequently, it disappears. You have healthier queens. They are local. And local to me, the most important thing about locally produced queens is they haven't been stressed out by shipping. And frequently they weren't produced in a high pesticide usage agricultural area and then shipped. Healthy queens are going to give you increased overwintering, which gives you increased profit and reduce stress for the average beekeeper, since no one likes to see their hives die during the winter. Requeening, as I mentioned, has become really popular. In commercial situations, queens are being replaced in an average of 8 months. It's a Dave Tarpey study. I didn't put the references here, but I can find them. And it is getting very popular with a lot of commercial beekeepers. And now I'm thinking that maybe even smaller scale hobbyist beekeepers need to think about not trying to keep that queen for a third spring. Maybe her second spring is going to be really good and really great. And you're tempted to keep her, but she is older and she has been exposed to things in our environment we can't control, like pesticides. The majority of beekeepers do believe the first or second spring queen outperforms anything older. Your late summer splits and the ones that we're producing will be emerging after the solstice. When a queen emerges after the solstice, she is considered a first spring queen the next year. She doesn't lose that youthfulness. So, a post-solstice young queen is considered to bring a greater population of younger bees into the winter, and after wintering, outperforms those new queens that have been shipped, caged, and stressed in other ways we don't know that you buy next spring or would buy next spring. I think this is an important part of sustainability. It's a buzzword, but it should be has real meanings word, especially for the small scale beekeeper. Healthier queens when needed, cutting out that queen loss. You lose a queen in the middle of the winter, you basically lose the colony. Colonies would be healthier. That is a part of sustainability to me. The one I really care about is if we are constantly shipping in more packages and more nukes, partly because we lost our queens in the middle of the winter, and then we lost our entire colonies. So we ship more in from states that are shipping in also with those nukes, new strains of the pests and pathogens that we're having trouble with, from varroa mites to viruses to increased antibiotic resistance in EFB or AFB bacteria. And if we stop bringing in all that sickness and illness and stress on our colonies, we're actually going to increase our production. And in terms of our stress reduction as beekeepers, if you're not interested in honey and you want to keep bees alive and keep them healthy, I think this is part of it. We need to stop bringing things, thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of hives into Washington State, the western part of Washington State alone, every year. Now, as a club, we are basically picking a method of how we are going to raise queens, partly by the process of elimination. The Journeyman's Manual of the Washington State Beekeepers Association's curriculum still goes through a lot of methods that were based on wax foundation. They really don't work with plastic foundation. Overwhelmingly, beekeepers have gone to plastic foundation. Yes, if you are following the Lands methods, or you're doing foundationless for whatever reason, not recommended for the first year or two of beekeeping. And I'd be happy to discuss with anyone why it doesn't really work. What I hear after people try it, why they have troubles with wax foundation, and you should avoid it the first couple of years. And then if you want to try it, then you will find that many of the methods of queen rearing that are historical and were popular with a lot of beekeepers before grafting really became accessible through information on the internet and through the equipment being sold by the bee supply stores. If you want to try those and you have wax wire or wax foundation, you'll be able to do the Hopkins, Alley, Miller methods. Swarm cells, instead of transferring the entire plastic foundation frame with swarm cells on it, you'll be able to do what are called cutouts. You cut out way around a queen cell, and then you can use that wax on a wax foundation to sort of gently push that queen cell right into the wax of a brood frame, very carefully. A lot of the methods want you to do various types of costly specialized equipment. Okay, if you're going to try those out, come try some of it out at a club apiary instead of buying it all first. We're giving you a chance to try before you buy. A lot of methods that are used in the other 49 and a half states of the United States depend on warm weather. Many depend on having a separate mating apiary, and you may not have an out apiary. That makes sense when you realize that your mating nukes are all weak. You're making deliberately weak hives, and if you put them right next to strong hives, that can be awkward. There's some ways to compensate for that. We'll show you as a club in the apiary how to compensate for the fact that you're putting what really are easily robbed out weak hives, colonies, next to large ones. Walkaway splits are what has always been the default for new beekeepers. They're not bad, but they tie up a lot of real estate, resources, and they reduce your total honey production for the year. So, in queen rearing methods, looking at it as a club, we need something suited to Western Washington, our cool maritime climate, a method that will be successful in cool, damp springs. Gee, imagine that, cool, damp springs in the Western Washington area. And it poured rain the other night. Yes, and we're still going down to the 30s at night where I am, which is a big problem for bees that are trying to brood up and get into summer mode. We're looking for a method that doesn't take up as much space for a hobbyist or urban beekeeper. We'll go through some of those methods, particularly at the end of the course. We need to reduce the amount of equipment needed if possible, less specialized equipment to buy. And also, there are ways to recombine your queenless splits afterwards. Splits or mating nukes. The mating flights weren't successful. Quite often that's it. You had a queen in there and she goes out and there's already a 25% loss rate just from a queen trying to make her mating flight and get back safely, successfully into her hive. And that's well known. And at a number of the steps in queen rearing, there is attrition. That alone is considered to be about 25%. And that is what we actually found when we have done it as an apiary, as a club. And then at the end of this, we need to talk in like the last couple of videos, what are you going to do with these excess queens? Are you going to overwinter them, keep them in reserve, sell them? And the whole concept of sustainability keeps coming up. It will. Can we get independent of out-of-state queen suppliers and seasonality, which traps us? Part of this we do by doing what the bees tell us to do. Not trying, well, as a club, we will not try to raise queens when the bees don't want to do it. Now that makes rearing queens a little bit problematic because we love our short season of good weather and we have a lot of other plans. Again, hard to make a 6-8 week commitment when your family and friends and all of society wants to schedule all kinds of things in the short season of good weather that we have. But we have to go with the bees or we have to compensate. So, swarm season. What are the bees telling us in swarm season? This is the correct time for them to reproduce. Their maximum success rate in queen rearing. They know it, and we have to somewhat work with it. On the other hand, we don't really want them swarming. We want to manage them. Part of the reason why they go into swarm mode is what makes queen rearing work. They know the forage is out there. If you try to raise queens at any time that is not the spring, you have to compensate for the fact that there's not the nectar flow you need. If you try to raise queens later, say in July, and look at our forage calendar, we go through it in beginner, apprentice, and I think very quickly in the journeyman class. Look at I did this from top clockwise. We have the hazelnuts, the willows, then we have native vegetation starting to bloom, but especially the European tree fruits that we all love, cherries, pears, apples, etc. And then about that time, in the middle of that, I would say, in April, we have the big leaf maple you see down on the lower right. Then we have the big blackberry flow bees. This is prime queen rearing time. Of course, we're also very busy and we don't want to cut down our honey production all the way. You can raise queens right afterwards, but you're going to have to maintain that feeling of nectar flow. The food is available. It's time to reproduce. The late season Japanese knotweed, which I picture over on the left, isn't really going to help you with queen rearing. It can help with overwintering. It is our big major flow. So knowing your plants, knowing when the honey flow is on, pollen alone is not enough. the bees need that nectar flow as well. And we don't really get that naturally until the maple flow. This year was one of the best maple flows in years. 2024 is going to go down as the maple honey production year. And I just have the list here quickly on this slide showing you what we go through in the honey beekeeping classes that we do here at the club. And every club should be going through the cycle. I showed you quickly 5 pictures of the highlights of our nectar flow, but there's a lot of pollen too. But pollen alone is not enough. We have pollen year round, but the bees know how to time the nectar flow coming from the forage and the brood rearing potential of pollen and nectar and the increasing daylight hours. And this all leads again to the swarm season. The bees know best when it's time to procreate. And that's when they're going to be raising queens and drones. And it's the easiest time for us to raise queens and drones too, if we can squeeze out the time, which is a lot easier as a club than it is as an individual. Here's a quick picture of the hours of daylight on the summer solstice. We actually have a greater honey production possibility than some of the states to our south because we hit the 15 and a half, 16, even 17 hours of daylight in Western Washington, around the Puget Sound area. And the bees are aware of that. They are in touch with nature. So in the SnoKing area, which we're considering South Snohomish County, although many of you actually are outside of Snohomish County, I know. But when you are looking at when to raise queens, it's easiest to work with the bees. And our timeline that we set up is based on our climate and to a certain extent microclimate. Also, it's a little later than some people would say you could raise queens because we have such highly variable spring weather. And this is the 3rd spring in a row that I would say is somewhat late. Not that that isn't common in Western Washington. Temperatures have been better this year than the previous 2 years, but they're still falling at night quite a bit. And that does impact how much bees have to cluster and how they see queen rearing. But they're ready to go. We have to watch out for rain dearth, inclement weather, as it says in the books. The swarm season is a good guideline. The method you pick, part of the method you pick is going to be the size of mating nukes that you'll use. And mating nukes can be made very small in very warm areas, or they can be grouped together so that they are less susceptible to the chilling effect of wet outsides being cooled by evaporative cooling. As the wind picks up, it rains, the wind blows, it rains, the wind blows, and the evaporative cooling cools the outside of, say, a 2-frame nuke very quickly. You have to give some wind protection for heat retention inside if you are going to have a smaller number of bees. The safest is to do 4 and 5 frame nukes, and you will always succeed in terms of thermal retention in each little mating nuke, so each queen can have her own little colony while she's being proofed. So I put in here the graphs. Maximum honey production, of course, is large hives. That's the top graph. 2 small ones, a swarm or a walkaway split, which is really an artificial swarm. When you make up a split, it's really actually an artificial swarm. And when you do that, if you half your hives, you reduce your honey production way down, unless we have an unusually warm spring or your microclimate is really helpful. The queen rearing wheel that we will send out to anybody signing up for the workshop is part of the workshop. as opposed to Man Lakes, which I noticed the price was $29.25 for it. It's very nice, but I like the one that the other beekeeping clubs shared on the internet. The license, originally it was a Lyson, Lyson Lyson wheel that they made opened to public use. So the Queen Rearing Workshop. This is the really shortest way that I can explain what we're going to do. We have already started. We've already had 2 sessions where people came out and started prepping the equipment and the inventory, building the colony populations. Especially, we need a lot of young bees to make the nukes, which, even though we're not putting the mating nukes together until about the 10th of June, that's not that long away. We need time to get those brood nests, and we need to keep those brood nests producing, hopefully maintaining our overwintering hives without letting them swarm. Right now, that's the most important thing we're doing, is using dim array, checkerboarding, and every technique we can right now to get large brood nests from which we can harvest the resources we need to make up those mating nukes in actually only about 3 weeks. This week, actually, as soon as I can finish this video and get out and do it, we need to insert the cassettes, which are really a grafting method, but it takes out one small step. The cassettes, we need to insert those into the colony we have selected that has come out of winter roaring. That queen is outperforming the others. We'll call that breeder queen colony number 1. And we need to let the bees get used to the plastic parts of the cassette system. We're going to need 2 of these, 2 cell builders. We're going to need 2 cell builders, at least one to put the cassettes into, and then one to put the grafted queen cups. And if you haven't done this, or research on the internet, hopefully we can make it all make sense by explaining it. This is the short timeline, though, and you can see there are dates here. These are the fairly urgent dates at the beginning, especially through the 10th. We need the most help at the beginning. We need continuing help at the end. The concepts we cover quite a bit at the beginning, because we need to get that open cassette to not smell like brand new plastic out of the factory. We want it to smell like hive right, especially hive right in the hive stack of the queen. We want to use her offspring, her eggs. Then we need to have cell builders, sometimes called cell starters, and we need to have a queenless situation that will raise out any eggs any young larvae just hatched or eclosed that we put in there. Queenless situation with lots of young bees who really want to raise out queens. And then we're going to make it easier with a couple of steps on the way. May 28th, we are going to take a brood frame, mark it on top. We know the date we put it in, which means if the queen lays right away in it, we know the age of the larvae, and it's going to be easier to graft. There are a number of steps in grafting that make your life easier, and this is one of them. Then the actual grafting, actually transferring a just eclosed is the correct word, egg that has eclosed into become the smallest larva, to graft that into the grafting cups. Pictures coming up on this. We need to do that on the 1st. On the 8th, we can calculate how many mating nukes we need. And then on the 10th, we can assemble the mating nukes. Then after that, we're looking for emergence of the queen. We're checking that she returned from a mating flight, laid eggs, and then it's still going to take us a couple more weeks to be sure that she's laying worker brood in a good pattern. Then distributing out the queens based on the people helped 5 hours per queen in the apiary. At the end, we could still reuse those mating nukes. There's a couple ways we can do that. So why aren't we just doing walk-away splits? Well, look at this person doing walk-away splits and working on hives right here. Look at the size of the standard hive, and then realize that every time you want to split one hive into 2 or pull enough resources off one hive, to make a queenless hive that will now raise its own queen. That's what walkaway split means. It means you just split the hive into two, the queen's in one. You don't even have to know which side she's in, which part. If you're splitting in two, you just make sure that both sides have eggs that are eclosing into larvae, and you can put whichever one has a queen will not raise a new queen. The one that the split the part of the hive that you put over to the side that doesn't have a queen has the ability to raise a queen. They will realize they are queenless, and they will take the youngest larvae and turn that into supersedure emergency cells. It's called imperfect supersedure, actually, because there's not a queen in the one that's queenless. But the bees in an emergency can make a queen out of any fertilized egg that would have become a worker, but now they're going to treat it like a queen, feed it unlimited royal jelly, and make their own queen. But if you do this with full-sized hives, look at how much space it takes up. Real estate and equipment, entire hives. This raises a question of, can you produce both queens and honey at the same time? Yes, but if you have one hive that's completely queenless, that hive, and you have two smaller ones, and you look at this chart, which I'll be happy to send out. I should send out a handout that goes with this video or with all the videos of what you need to visualize when you are making this decision, or you've done walkaway splits for a year or two and you've watched your honey production fall and you've realized that a queenless hive is going to take a while to recover, raise its own queen, and it's not just a few days. You lose weeks worth of production, plus two small hives don't make the amount of honey that one large one does. To show the real estate problem, as a club, we could make up a lot of little mating nukes. Look at this picture. I have a red circle around the two large hive stacks, and then a black oval around the queen compartments. Takes up a lot of space, but if I take large hives and I split them into a lot of queen hive stacks, I lose honey production, but I can proof a lot of queens. Easier to do as a club than as a small apiary. But you can look at the system, decide what works for you. We have a number of double nukes, queen castles. We have a number of equipment types, specialized equipment types that are shown in this picture. But try before you buy. Come out to the Queen Workshop and do it there. So you sort of ask yourself throughout this process, you should be asking yourself, is grafting the best for me? It is the most famous method of queen rearing because of the internet. You could raise a lot of queens at one time. If you are looking at requeening or can figure out how to deliver and sell these queens, it may be good for you to have a lot of queens at one time. You can schedule the production. Maybe you have vacations and other commitments in your life, and you need to know when you are making queens, and you can schedule your effort and your time, as well as sales and whatever else your life involves outside of beekeeping. Beekeepers do have a life outside of beekeeping. Try this drafting out before you invest in it. Some people go right away, there's no way that I am doing this, what Melanie's doing in this picture, carefully picking out enclosed larvae and moving them into cups. Look at the tiny size up above in the cups. In some, you can hardly see that there's something inside the royal jelly. And barely curved, clear larvae. Those are the larvae you're supposed to be transferring from a brood frame where the queen is laid 4 days before into the cups. It is tricky. Some people hate it. Some people love it. They're so good at it. And here's 3 types of grafting tools pictured on this picture. And you can try them out before buying them in the club. Here's 2 grafting systems. The upper left is the cassette system, sometimes called Nicot or Genter, or sometimes they'll call it graft free. but you're really getting the queen to lay in the cup instead of you transferring the larvae into the cup. You're getting her to lay in there, and then you're picking up the cup and moving it over to your cell builder hive. Then on the lower right is the one that I think most people have seen, where you're what Melanie was doing, putting the little larvae into the cups and then hanging the cups upside down in a queenless hive with a lot of young bees who know they're queenless and are just dying to raise out queens for you. The mating nukes. On the lower left is a specialized styrofoam. Sounds like a really good system. I can explain the do's and don'ts of it, and we can try it out as a club. That's one of those try before you buy. You can always use a 4 or 5 frame nuke that you see in the upper right for a number of purposes inside your apiary. Some of the specialized mating cassette, mating mini nukes are not necessarily a good idea for the average small scale beekeeper. So here's a picture of steps and what we will cover, what we can cover as a beekeeping club. Some of it is the failures as well as the successes. The lower right-hand picture shows variable results in grafting. One thing that happens when people graft the first time is they try to graft larvae they can see easily, and as a result, they put in larvae that are too large. The bees sort of raise them out sometimes, but they aren't going to be good queens. They didn't get royal jelly from basically the time they went from egg to larva, and that's a very short period of development for queens. I believe it's 5.5 days that they spend as a larva getting stuffed as full as the bees can stuff them with royal jelly. So actually, you're looking at some really funny looking cells there, some good, some bad, and a lot of it has to do with not getting the grafting step to work well. The cassette can take away part of the problem there. Then all the checking that you do, all the constantly looking for queens, looking for emergence, looking to see about their brood pattern, maintaining the mating nukes that we've made up, properly inserting into the correct cell builder type nucleus hive or even larger hive that you need to really have a high success rate in raising queens, and record keeping. We've developed a system of record keeping right on the mating nuke. So people can walk up and say, what am I supposed to do with this nuke today when you come into the apiary to work? This is a picture of drone laying queen on the left. She wasn't properly proofed. This is happening all too often. People sometimes mistake it for laying worker. I actually hope we get a drone layer queen, although it's rare, but I would hope we get one because pictures don't really show you why it's not a laying worker. If you see it once, you can recognize it for the rest of your life, but it's something I don't see well represented on the internet, and it is becoming all too common in Western Washington, partly due to weather that prevents queens from mating, partly due to queens that are shipped in and were never properly mated, and they can lay only drones, and they are in our packages and in our nukes. And then I have a shotgun pattern over on the right. So these are what you don't want to see. And caged queens have been impacted by shipping stress. The traits we can evaluate when we proof our queens at the end of the 6 to 8 week period, we are looking for that spiral pattern, a beautiful laying pattern, fairly tight, not too many holes as we call them, but some of those holes can be necessary for ventilation, heating, cooling. The bees know what they're doing, but it should be a fairly tight pattern in a spiral. We'll help mark queens. You're going home with a marked queen on a frame of her own brood. It is very important. Why make your life hard? We'll go through how to mark queens. There's a picture, thinking about it, on a frame of her own brood versus in a cage introduction where things can go wrong. At the end, we'll talk about, do you really want to graft? probably my last video will be, okay, maybe you want to use some form of this that's a little different. Some people combine grafting or they don't graft, they get their queen cells by using, in special ways, a queen excluder, a cloak board, or a snell grow board. And I can explain those methods at the end of the course. I'm working on a bibliography. A lot of what we're doing is the advice and the expertise, the do it or don't do it, what to watch out for, is coming from Grant Gillard's book, SnoKing Queen Raising, which is available on Amazon. Morris Ostrowski, he did Graft Free, which again, really, he's talking, I believe, cassettes. I haven't read that book in a while. Queen Spotting is a nice book, which is kind of fun for people who want to practice spotting queens. Although it's still shots in a book, it is a bit of a challenge. It's a good one for spotting queens. The Beekeeper's Handbook, we always use their black and white diagrams. When you see them in anything I do, it tends to be Beekeeper's Handbook. The latest edition is 5th edition by Diane Samatero and Alphonse Avatable. In all of this, I'd like to point out that many hands make light work. They can also make great queens. So here again is how to join, and start by emailing, paying the dues, sign up on Sign Up Genius, call me, talk to me, especially if you can come midweek, because there are things that it's better if they're done midweek. And should we fail to get something done on Saturday, again, the link is not here. I will send it out to anyone who's interested. And the next short video will be coming shortly. With that, I will stop this recording. Hope I didn't go too long, and start the next short video recording. Thanks for watching this. I hope you are going to join us.